Hi, welcome to CKLA Chats. I am DLC Foster-Yankey, and today we're going to be talking about Lesson 2, Changes in Everyday Life in Unit 6, in 5th grade, Unit 6, The Reformation. Okay, let me get ready here. All right, so our core text for this lesson is Letters Come Alive, or Chapter 2 in the Reader. And students are reading this chapter. Is a work of historical fiction that tells the story of a boy working in a printing shop during the Reformation to get a better idea of the impact of the printing press on everyday life. Okay, so I think it is the only literary selection in the reader. All right, so we'll start with the first component of Lesson 2, which is reading. Here's our cup. Students will know the process of using a printing press. They'll understand that the printing press made books accessible for ordinary people, and they'll be able to orally explain in cooperative groups how the printing press changed everyday lives after reading a historical fiction selection titled Letters Come Alive. So the reading component is divided into 3 subcomponents that total 45 minutes, or half of your 90-minute reading block. The first subcomponent is small group reading, which will take 30 minutes. The teacher is going to begin by reviewing the previous lesson, Lesson 1, and they'll do that by asking students questions about how books were made during the Middle Ages, before Gutenberg's printing press was invented, how the printing press worked and how it changed Europe during the Renaissance. And the point of these questions is that the more widespread books became, the more widespread powerful ideas also became, which started to cause changes in Europe and in the church. Okay, so after making that point, the teacher is going to introduce Chapter 2, Letters Come Alive. The students, as they always do, they're going to use the table of contents to find the first page of the chapter. And the teacher is going to explain that this chapter is a special type of literary text known as historical fiction that is meant to give the reader a sense of what it was like to live around the time Gutenberg's printing press was invented. They'll also talk a little bit, like really briefly, about what historical fiction is, just like a definition of the genre. As they also usually do, they'll preview the vocabulary, have a student read the big question of the chapter, which is, how did the printing press affect the lives of ordinary people? The teacher is going to make sure that students understand the meaning of the big question. And then some prep work that should have happened ahead of time is the teacher will have divided the class into 2 groups. The first group is going to include students who need extra scaffolding and support to read and comprehend the text. They're going to read and complete activity page 2.2 with teacher support. And then the second group is going to work either in small groups with a partner or independently to read the chapter and discuss it with others as they complete activity page 2.2. So in small group 1, the teacher is going to have a student read the chapter title aloud. Then the teacher is going to read the first 2 paragraphs aloud and have students read the remainder silently. So on this page here, when they're done reading, the teacher is going to ask, I think I clicked ahead. Ask literal questions about pages 14 and 15. And I have the questions here on the screen. So very basic, who are the characters, and describe the setting, which they'll use page 15 here to do that. Hey, then students are going to read pages 16 and 17 silently, and the teacher is going to ask these inferential and literal questions. After they answer the first question, students will record their answer to number 1, which is the same question, on that activity page, and also the page number, citing the page number where they found their answer. After the students read page 17, they're going to begin completing the chart for question number 2 on activity page 2.2. The teacher will tell them that they'll fill in more information on Jacques later after they learn more about all his jobs, because that's what they're doing here, writing the name of each character and or the jobs he does in the printing shop. The teacher's also going to follow their completion of that chart by asking some more literal and inferential questions, which are listed here at the bottom. Then they're going to continue with the students reading page 18 and the first 3 paragraphs over here on page 19 silently. The teacher is going to be asking literal and inferential questions, and the students will answer question number 3 on activity page 2.2. Always writing down the page number that supports whatever answer they select. Continue with students reading pages 20 and 21 silently. The teacher asks literal and inferential questions, and students will add some more to their chart about Jacques. Yeah. Question number 2 on their activity page. Students will read page 22 silently. The teacher is still asking inferential and literal questions, and students will record their answer to question 4 on activity page 2.2, 2-part question, and it follows the questions that the teacher is asking. So it's whatever she asks, they're basically recording it on the activity page. But what does Henri know about Jacques when he asked him to put away the type into the case? So writing their answer and writing the page number where they found it, and why. Why does Henri ask Jacques to put away the type anyway? Hey, students are going to read page 23 silently and then work independently to answer question number 5 on activity page 2.2. Afterwards, they'll compare their answers with a partner. There is a check for understanding where the teacher is going to quote some dialogue from the reader, which is Henri tells Jacques, "The ability to read will change the world. You mark my words, Jacques." What does Henri mean when he says, "mark my words"? Students are going to think, pair, share about that. The teacher is going to allow a few pairs to share out and then confirm the meaning of the saying as, "remember what I'm saying because it will be true." Then the teacher is going to ask an evaluative question, and students are going to record their answer to question 6 on activity page 2.2. Hey, the class is going to discuss the evaluative. We're at the wrap up of the reading component now for 10 minutes. So they're going to wrap up by discussing the evaluative and, if necessary, that support question as well in small groups. So this will be a good opportunity for the teacher to allow the group that she was working with and the group that wasn't working with her to mix and mingle. So they'll get to share those ideas. Several students, after they've discussed, will share out, and students will record their answer to question number 7 on activity page 2.2. The teacher will conclude by reminding students that as a result of Gutenberg's printing press, Jacques is exposed to books and is planning to learn to read, and that the story is historical fiction. So just that reminder. They will assign activity page 2.3 for homework, and that is an excerpt from Letters Come Alive, so the same text that they read in class today. And make sure that they understand the directions, which are read the excerpt from Letters Come Alive, then based on what you read, help Jacques write instructions for using the printing press, which is what they'll be doing on this page. And they'll fill in each blank with the correct word from the word bank. Each word is used only once, and then they'll write the number of the paragraph from the text that best supports their answer. The last instruction is supported by an image rather than by text. Okay, so filling in the blanks with the right word and the page number from the excerpt where they found their answer. They will follow the wrap up with some word work. They're learning about the word mechanism in today's word work for 5 minutes. The teacher is going to use the word in context in a sentence where it's found in the reader. She'll have students repeat the word, give them the definition, a sample sentence, ask them for examples of things that, that's not right. That's from Revolutionize. So disregard that. Student 2 to 3 students will use the word mechanism in a sentence. The teacher will ask for part of speech. They'll follow up with a making choices activity where the teacher is going to read a sentence and the students will decide which mechanism is being described. Then they'll restate the sentence using the name of the mechanism described in the sentence. And that brings us to the next component of lesson 2, which is language. So our language component is divided into 2 subcomponents for a total of 30 minutes. The first, they're going over interjections in grammar. The teacher is going to explain the focus of today's grammar lesson, which is interjections. They will direct students' attention to the anchor chart and have one read the definition of interjection. Students are going to brainstorm a list of possible interjections. And then the teacher will have prepared example sentences, which I have listed here in the bottom. They're found in the advanced preparation section of the lesson. And in these sentences, students are going to identify the word or phrase in each that is an interjection. The teacher will point out the 2 types of interjections listed on the anchor chart, strong and mild, and have students read what follows each type. So exclamation point or a comma. And point out that looking for an exclamation point or comma in a sentence after an interjection can help them determine the type of interjection being used. They'll also note that interjections do not represent complete sentences or play the role of subject or verb. There's a check for understanding where the teacher asks students if they know what the word interject means and what it has to do with the word interjection. Students are going to think, pair, share about that while the teacher circulates during their discussion. And when they come back whole group, if no one knows what an interjection is, the teacher is going to clarify that when someone interjects, they say something that usually interrupts another person or ongoing conversation, similar to the way an interjection sticks out or interrupts a sentence. So afterwards, after the check for understanding, the teacher again directs students' attention to the example sentences prepared in advance. For each interjection identified, the teacher asks students to identify the type. So in each of these sentences, they're going to identify whether it's strong or mild and how they determined the type, how they knew whether it was strong or mild. Then the teacher will ask students what feeling or emotion the example is expressing. For example, anger, frustration, or happiness, etc. And the teacher will guide students in using the process of elimination to help identify the words in the sentences that stick out and that are not subjects, verbs, nouns, adjectives, prepositions, etc. Next, the teacher is going to arrange students into groups and pass out some sentences, or she can have them on index cards that they prepared in advance. The students will work in small groups to create an interjection and sentence in response to an example of a situation. So on each index card or sentence strips, these are all examples of situations. And in their group, the students are going to come up with a response to that situation that uses an interjection. And then when they come back whole group, as time permits, the teacher is going to call on groups to share their situation and response. The rest of the class is going to decide whether the interjection is strong or mild, what feeling or emotion is being expressed, and what punctuation marks should be added after the interjection. After that, the students will turn to activity page 2.4, and the teacher is going to read the directions for each section. I think there's 2 sections or 3. And then review the examples given for each section, just making sure students understand what to do here, and then assign that for homework. Moving on to morphology for 15 minutes. It's all about the prefix in. The teacher is going to refer to the prefixes anchor chart. And this is not the prefixes anchor chart. It's actually from a previous unit. I couldn't find which one, but they should already have a prefixes anchor chart in their room that they have been working on throughout the year so far. So with that anchor chart, the teacher is going to remind students that prefixes are added to the beginning of root words to make new words. They'll briefly review prefixes learned in the previous unit and in the previous day's lesson. They talked about and Reformation. They'll introduce the prefix in by writing it on the anchor chart, pointing out its pronunciation and what it means. And the teacher will proceed to explain what happens when in is added to root words and model adding in to the root word able. Students are going to read the new word in able and discuss the meaning. The teacher will share examples of enable used in a sentence and ask students to provide sentences using the word. They'll repeat with the remaining in words using the chart on page 68 of the teacher's guide, which is what is here. So they'll repeat adding the prefix in to each of these root words, and they will do as many as time permits. They will follow that up with a check for understanding, where the teacher explains that not all words beginning with in are verbs created by adding the prefix to a root. So the teacher's going to say some in words and have students give a thumbs up for words with a prefix in root and a thumbs down for others. So for example, they'll say the word entertain, and if it has the prefix in, students give a thumbs up, and if it doesn't, it's a thumbs down. And the teacher may write those words on a board or chart paper. That would be good to add to the anchor chart. I think this wraps up morphology. The teacher is going to read the directions for activity page 2.5, which are to write the correct word to complete each sentence. You may need to add ed, ing, or s to make the word correctly fit in the sentence. She or he, the teacher, will complete the first question with students, pointing out that the sentence is written in the past tense because it refers to the 1500s, and students will complete the remainder for homework. Okay, which brings us to writing. So in writing, they're going to be working on a friendly letter for 30 minutes. They're going to be reading a friendly letter for 30 minutes. The teacher is going to tell students they will read and study a friendly letter and write their own letters later. The teacher will direct students to the sample letter anchor chart, which is on activity page 2.6. So you probably want to have a big handwritten anchor chart of this up in your room or make it into a poster. The students will work in small groups to read and study the letter, sharing what they notice about its layout. The teacher tells them that the letter has 5 parts. Then students use highlighters or small sticky notes to color code them. So it says highlighters or sticky notes, but the teacher's probably going to use sticky notes because students will be making corrections as they go throughout the lesson. So sticky notes would probably be best. While they are working on that in their small groups, the teacher is going to circulate and guide their conversations. When they come back together, whole group, some groups are going to share out their ideas. The teacher will then explain the 5 parts of a typical friendly letter, and students will correct their color coding on activity page 2.6 and add labels. So then the teacher will ask students what information appears in the heading and have students point to where on the letter it is. They should be pointing to the upper right-hand corner where the address and date appear. The teacher is going to explain greetings and salutations and the body of a letter, mainly talking about how the letter's purpose is usually stated in the first paragraph in the body. The teacher will ask students what they think the purpose of the sample letter is. So they're going to do a think, pair, share about that, the purpose of the sample letter. And they're also going to find the sentence that announces the purpose. So once they've had a chance to discuss that, volunteers will share out. The teacher is going to clarify the purpose and where it appears if no group shared out the correct response. The teacher is going to go on to explain that some letters try to convince the reader of something by offering an argument and evidence. And students are going to think, pair, share again to identify the argument in the sample letter and the sentence in which it appears. And then they'll repeat that process again by identifying evidence that Jacques is a hard worker. There is a check for understanding where the teacher calls on several students to share some other purposes that letters could have by asking, how is this letter different from a business letter? Students raise their hand if they think a friendly letter is usually written to someone the person knows. And then they raise it again if they think a business letter is usually written to someone the person does not know as closely. Hey, moving on, the teacher is going to explain that most letters have a conclusion at the end of the body of the letter and talk about what a conclusion does. The teacher will ask whether the sample letter has one, and if so, what is it? And then the teacher will explain that friendly letters should always include closings, and then go on to explain what a closing is. The teacher will have students identify the closing in the sample letter, and students will name other closings they may have seen. The teacher will explain the final part of a friendly letter, the signature, then have students identify the signature in the sample letter. Then the teacher is going to explain the concept of PS or postscript and talk about why authors add it. The students will identify what Jacques' father asked Monsieur Lafarge to do in the postscript. Then students will return to activity page 2.6 to correct and add information about the 5 sections. They're also going to write the purpose of the letter in their own words at the bottom. So wherever there's some white space where they can do some writing. Then the teacher is going to collect their activity pages and inform them that later on in the unit, they're going to write their own friendly letters. Okay. So their take-home material, as we mentioned earlier in the lesson, are activity pages 2.3, 2.4, and 2.5, all for homework. Okay. And that concludes lesson 2. Thanks for watching.